Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to talk about a story today that starts out like an absolute dream, a perfect retirement on the open ocean, but it ends in a chilling nightmare at the bottom of it. This is the story of Tom and Jackie Hawks.
So let's just lay out this timeline, because it really sets the stage for how a perfect life can take such a dark and sudden turn. I mean, think about it. In just 2 short years, the Hawks go from living out their hard-earned freedom to just vanishing, without a trace.
Okay, so before we dive into the tragedy of it all, I think it's really important for you to understand the dream, what Tom and Jackie were working towards their entire lives.
I mean, these two were the real deal. They met at a chili cook-off, of all places, back in '86 and just built this incredible life together. Jackie was a wonderful stepmom to Tom's 2 boys, and they had this plan, right? They saved every single penny for years with one goal: retire on a yacht. And in 2002, they did it. They sold the house, bought the well-deserved, and for 2 solid years, they were living their absolute dream. But then, in 2004, something amazing happened that made them completely change course. Their first grandchild was on the way. And for Jackie, who couldn't have kids of her own, this was everything. She was absolutely over the moon. So the decision was easy: sell the boat, come back to land, and be doting grandparents.
So they put an ad in a magazine, and pretty quickly, they found a buyer. They called up their family, super excited to share the good news that the boat was sold. And then, just silence. Eerie, complete silence.
And this is when the first major red flag goes up. Tom's brother, Jim, who happened to be a retired police chief, by the way, goes to check on the boat. And what he finds is a total mess. Now, you have to understand, Tom was meticulous. Everything had its place. This wasn't just messy, it was just wrong. And Jim, with his cop instincts, he knew it instantly. Something was very, very wrong here.
So Jim leaves his business card on the boat, right? And soon after, he gets a call from one of the new owners, a woman named Jennifer DeLeon. And her story, it sounds plausible enough on the surface. She says, yeah, it was a simple cash sale, and they just watched the Hawks hop in their car and drive away, probably to start a new life. But something about it just didn't sit right with Jim. And now things start to escalate. The Hawks are officially reported as missing persons. And that nearly $500,000 payment for the boat, it never showed up in their bank account. So naturally, the police start taking a very close look at the buyers, Jennifer and her husband, Skylar DeLeon. Okay, so this buyer, Skylar DeLeon, is a real piece of work. This 25-year-old guy claims he's some former child actor from Power Rangers. Kind of wild, right? Well, a quick background check showed he was actually a convicted felon for armed robbery. And get this, when police question him, he actually admits the boat purchase was a money laundering scheme. But he sticks to his story. The Hawks took the cash and left happy.
At this point, the investigation is kind of hitting a brick wall. The cops have a super suspicious buyer with a wild story, but no body, no weapon, no real proof of foul play. It really looked like a dead end. But then, a phone call. A tip comes in from all the way down in Mexico about the Hawks SUV.
And this is where Skylar's whole story just completely unravels. Remember how he said the Hawks drove off in their SUV? Well, that very same car was found in Mexico because Skylar had given it to a friend. He said a notary witnessed the sale. Turns out he paid her to backdate the documents, and she'd never even met the Hawks. The whole thing was a sham, start to finish.
So with his story in absolute tatters, the police turn up the heat on the so-called witness to the sale, a guy named Alonzo Mason. And facing some serious prison time, he cracks. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Mason decides to tell them everything.
And let's be really clear here, this wasn't some deal that just went south. No, this was a cold, calculated plot from the very beginning. The goal was simple and brutal: steal the boat, steal their money, and make sure Tom and Jackie Hawks were never, ever seen again.
This part is just so incredibly chilling. Tom, remember, he was a former probation officer, and he had a really bad feeling about Skylar and his crew. His gut was screaming at him, and he was actually about to call the whole sea trial off. But then, Skylar's wife, Jennifer, shows up, holding their baby, and just like that, the entire dynamic changes. Jackie's heart just melts, the tension is gone, and they agree to go. It was the perfect, most cynical lure you could imagine.
And once they were far out at sea, miles from anyone who could possibly help, the ambush began. Skylar and another guy, a gang member named John Kennedy, they jumped Tom down below. At the exact same time, Alonzo Mason grabs Jackie.
She was overpowered and in handcuffs before she could even process what was happening.
So now they're bound and blindfolded in their own bedroom on their dreamboat. Jackie is, understandably, terrified. But here's this heartbreaking detail. Alonzo Mason, the accomplice, later recalled hearing Tom comforting her. He was stroking her hand and telling her, "It's going to be okay. No matter what happens to us, we'll be together."
They're then dragged up on deck, and this is where Skylar forces them to sign the paperwork, documents that gave him everything. Not just the boat, but power of attorney, their entire life savings, everything they had worked so hard for.
But even in that terrifying moment, Jackie did something incredible. A final, quiet act of defiance. On one of the signature lines, she intentionally misspelled her last name. She left off the S. It was a tiny thing, but it was a message, a clue for the future, that she signed this against her will.
And then, the unthinkable. The men tied Tom and Jackie to the boat's heavy anchor, and while they were still alive, they threw it overboard. They were pulled down 3,500 feet to the bottom of the ocean. Their bodies were never found. But Alonzo Mason's confession, that changed everything. It gave prosecutors the entire story, everything they needed to bring these killers to justice for this absolutely monstrous crime. So what happened to them? Well, the sentences really reflected each person's role in the murders. Alonzo Mason, the one who talked, he got 20 years. Jennifer DeLeon, the one who used her own baby as bait, got life in prison. And for the two men who actually committed the murders, Skylar DeLeon and John Kennedy, they were both sentenced to death. And if you thought this couldn't get any more disturbing, listen to this final detail. When police searched the DeLeon's home, they found Tom and Jackie's personal video camera. And on the tape, they found footage of the Hawks, just enjoying their final trips. But the killers had recorded right over it, with footage of their own Thanksgiving dinner. They literally erased the memories of the people they had just murdered. It just leaves you with this chilling question, right? How does pure evil gain our trust? The story of Tom and Jackie Hawks is just this horrifying reminder that sometimes the most monstrous intentions can hide behind the most disarming things. A friendly smile, a plausible story, or in this case, the innocent face of a baby.